chapter 17, page 18 of your book. This is chapter 17, verses 1 through 9. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them. And from the cloud a voice said, "This is my son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." This is the word of God for the people of God. So here we have, welcome to Transfiguration Sunday. It's the end of what we call ordinary time. We're going into the Lenten season and then Easter, then Pentecost, and we'll be back in ordinary time. But ordinary time is bookended by this Sunday called Transfiguration Sunday. Now, a little background on what's happened. We've jumped ahead in Matthew quite a bit to chapter 17. We were last in the Sermon on the Mount, which is chapters 5, 6, and 7. This is much later. This is midway through Jesus' ministry. So far he's been teaching and healing. But right before this, he asked his disciples, "Who do you think I am?" And Peter responded, "You are the Messiah." And Jesus responded in kind. He said, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood is not revealed to you." And he says that he'll build his church on this rock. At that point, he starts developing Peter a bit. Because the next thing is Jesus foretells his death and resurrection. And he tells the disciples that he has to go to Jerusalem. And there he's going to die and be raised up. And Peter says, he began to rebuke him. Peter started rebuking Jesus. He said, "God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you." And Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan." He's like, "That's not the way, Peter." So that's what happened right before this. So now the Transfiguration, 6 days later, Jesus takes Peter and James and John up on top of this mountain. So he took them away from where they were to a place separate, a place that was holy. That's what holy means. Holy means separate. When God in the Old Testament says, "I will make you a holy people," it means you'll be different than others. You'll be separate. And it was a place that they could get away from their everyday life and they could focus on Jesus. That was the point. And he gets them up there. And then all of a sudden he is transfigured. It says his face shone like the sun and his clothes became dazzling white. The deity, the godness of Jesus came out of his human body. And for that special moment, Jesus' outward appearance reflected what his inward form was. And suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with them. That must have been an amazing sight, right? To see Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus, not talking to him and teaching him something or anything. They're just having a conversation with Jesus. But as great as impression as Moses and Elijah made, you still have Jesus over here dazzlingly white, right? It didn't compare to Jesus at that moment. Moses, in the past, each of them had their own glory. Moses, after he came down from the mountain, the story that we read in Exodus earlier, it says that he had to wear a veil on his face because the people of Israel said, "We can't stand to look at you. You're just shining too bright." He experienced the glory of God in the same way. He went up on a mountain and the cloud came down around him. Elijah, he was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind and there was a chariot of fire. He's seen some stuff too. But Jesus outshone them both. This is the difference between the created beings talking with their creator. And then Peter, good old Peter, says to Jesus, Lord, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Peter says, it's a good thing we're here, because this wouldn't go well without us, right? We believe you. And he offers to build a dwelling, or the word is a tabernacle, a tent, a habitation for each of them. It's like that hymn that we were singing we don't just want to stay on the mountain and live that high experience forever, yet go and do some work afterwards. So he thinks Jesus is the Messiah. He just said it like half a chapter ago. But he doesn't yet understand the nature of just how much that involves. He thinks it's going to be some diplomatic leader, some political, some military leader who's going to protect them and save them. God's trying to explain that it's something much bigger. So while he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my son, the beloved, with him I'm well pleased." Listen to him. Peter got cut off mid-sentence. It says, while he was still speaking. God said, no, that's enough of that. God's teaching Peter and James and John here also as well a lesson. He says 4 things here. This is my son. This is not just another great man. This is not Moses, your great lawgiver. This is not Elijah, the great prophet. This is like nobody you've ever seen. This is my son, the beloved. So, the Father is saying Jesus is dear to him. He loves him just as we love our own children. And would you give up your children for somebody? For a bunch of people who didn't even deserve it? This is my beloved. He's saying how much he loves him. With him, I'm well pleased. Jesus is doing the will of his Father. Anybody proud of their child? Anybody not proud? What would be the reason? Whether they're following your will, in your will or not. Listen to him. That's the last thing he says. Keep following his teachings. This one, he'll show you the way. So, when the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. God is so beyond us. God is so awesome, so magnificent. It's just beyond our comprehension. The sight of Jesus and Moses and Elijah, they looked at that and they were excited. The presence of God talking to them dropped them to their knees, though. That's something on a whole nother level. That's why even when Moses went up to the mountain, God says, you'll hear me, but you cannot see my face. Whoever sees my face cannot look on me and live. And actually, it says that God put Moses in a little rock, and then he walked beside me and said, you can look at the back of me. You can see the back of me, but you can't look at the front. King James says his hind parts. Interesting there. But he's completely overwhelming. And that's the reason that he sent Jesus to us. So that we would have something in between God and man. Something fully God and fully man, a bridge, a guide, a savior for us. And Jesus came and touched them, saying, get up and do not be afraid. So first, note, Jesus came to them. He didn't make them crawl in. God always makes the first move in approaching us. Before we were even born, God was reaching out to us. And then he touched them and he said, get up and do not be afraid. It says the verse before, they were overcome by fear. Jesus knew that. That's why the first thing he addressed was that. Get up and do not be afraid. And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. Now they didn't see Moses or Elijah. They saw Jesus. There is a song that says, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. They looked up and they focused on Jesus, and they didn't see Moses or Elijah. They just saw the face of Jesus. And he was so wonderful that everything else just faded away. Do you have your own struggle that's knocked you to the ground? You have a situation maybe that has you overcome with fear? Get up. Do not be afraid. Jesus is approachable. We don't have to fall on our face with fear around him. He became who he is for our sakes, to give us something we can relate to. And through him, to be able to relate to a God so much bigger than ourselves that we can never do it without someone just like Jesus to bridge that gap and lead us there. Amen. And our hymn of response